going to make a predicate block to figure out if my list contains any repeats in it. And by repeats, I mean two of the same thing in a row. In this case, I have made a list called letters. It's a list which contains letters. And I want to check to see if I have the same letter twice or more than twice in a row. And if I do, I'm going to return true, else I'm going to return false. So the first thing I will do is make a block, and I'll call the block repeat in list. And it's a list category, and it's a predicate. Predicates are Boolean operators. They return true or false. Remember, commands do something. Reporters report back some information, non-true or false, probably. And predicates must return true or false. So I'll hit OK. And I somehow have to go through my entire list and check to see if two things in a row are the same. And if they are, I'm going to return true. So I'm going to go to, you guessed it, I'm going to go to control. I'm going to use a for loop, which you probably knew already. And I'm going to go through the entire list, which this is routine by now. You know how to go through the entire list. I'm going to go from 1 to the length of the list, which is, of course, underneath the list blocks here, length of list. And again, I want to make sure not to use letters. This is for a specific list. I want to use the name of the list that's passed in. So for I equals 1 to length of list. So how am I going to check to see if two things in the list are the same? Well, I want to somehow check to see if this guy is equal to the next guy. If this guy is equal to the next guy, obviously I'm going to use some kind of equals here and some kind of if statement as well. So I want to check if the item at I is equal to the next item. Well, what is the next item called? Again, I'll go to my lists. Is the item at I got to be careful about pasting this into the right place, is the item at item I of list equal to the next item in the list? Well, this would say, are two items equal to each other? Or is an item equal to itself? That's not really what I want. I want the next item. Well, what would the next item be? Well, the next item is the item 1 past I, also known as I plus 1. I know that seems also a little weird there, but think about that. I'm on item I. Let's say I is 3. The next item is 3 plus 1 is 4. Oh, that must be item 4. So this will compare two items in a row next to each other. Item I plus 1 in list. If those are equal, somehow I have to remember that, oh, I found a repeat. So I think I'm going to need a variable here, another variable. Let's make a script variable, and let's call it repeats, perhaps. I forgot to spell repeats, R-E-P-E-A-T-S. And what should I initialize repeats to? Should I assume that repeats is true or false? Have I found any repeats yet? I think I haven't found any repeats yet, so I'm going to initialize it as false. Now, remember, these predicate blocks return true or false values. So I don't want to just type in the word true or false. I want to actually use these true false blocks right here. True false blocks. So I have not found any repeats yet. I'm setting repeats to false. Okay, great. And as soon as I find a repeat in the list, I'm going to set repeats to true. So let me duplicate this. And then, of course, at the very, very end, I just have to return the value of repeats. So let's go to control, and I'm going to report at the very end here. I'm going to report what the value what the value of repeats is. So I'm going to report repeats, which will have been set to either true or false. So does this make sense? How is this going to check any two items? Well, I equals 1 initially, so it's going to check item 1 compared to item 2. Then I is going to equal 2. It's going to check item 2 to item 3, and so forth. So let's give this a run. I think this makes sense. So if I find two things in a row, it'll set repeats to true because it found repeats. All right, great. So let's give it a quick run. And hopefully I can find it somewhere. Repeats in list. All right, the name of my list is letters. So let's see what happens. Repeats in letters. True. Let me run it one more time. Actually, let me get rid of one of these things. So let's get rid of one of these R's. So now it does not have repeats. A, B, R, H, K, M. All right. So now if I run it, it says false. There are no repeats. One quick thing though, you'll notice when I run this thing, I'll run it again. See how the outline of this thing flashed red for a moment? That's bad news. Now, Snap lets you get away with that, but actually we have an error here, and this is really unacceptable. Why do you suppose we have an error? Well, are you thinking about it? The reason we have an error, and this again, when you see something flash red like this in Snap, it means there's an error. The reason we have an error is because we're actually trying to read past the end of the list. Let me edit that again. Well, how are we reading past the end of the list? How are we going past the end of the list? Well, because I'm comparing I to the next guy in the list, but yet I'm going the length of the list. So the last comparison is comparing item 6, because that's the length of the list, with item 6 plus 1, which is item 7. There is no item 7. So really what I should do here to get this completely correct, and you really should do this, is I really should only repeat for I equals 1 to the length of the list minus 1. I'm not quite going to the end of the list. I'm going 1 less than the length of list. So from 1 to length of list minus 1. All right, let's give that another try and see if it works. Did we get anything flash red, or is it? I think it's all good. And still telling me false. Okay, I want to do one more thing real quick. I'm going to test a bunch of other cases. Let me just duplicate this. I'm going to show you another really super quick way of making lists. So let me, okay, we've been making lists this kind of long way where we like add. There's a quick way of making lists. I can just grab this list block right here, and I can just add a bunch of elements to this. So let's do letters again. I'll do A, I don't know, C, maybe I'll do another C, and I don't know, I'll do an X or something. So that's a quick way of making a list. That's my list right here. And I can test out my blocks really quick this way. So let's see if there's any repeats in this guy. Run it, and it says true, there is a repeat because C is in there twice, all right? Let's duplicate that. Let's try something else. So this time maybe I'll get rid of this C. I think I actually have to back up the whole thing, all right? So actually, let's just try this, AC. Are there repeats there? False, there are no repeats. I'll make one other list. I don't know, actually, let's just make sure it works with just one letter in it. We really should test that. Are there any repeats in that? False. What if there's just two letters and they're the same? Does that work? True. I think this thing is going to work in every case. Let me just add one more thing again. Let's do A, D, Z. I don't know. If we tried something like that, false, there are no repeats. So I think this works in every case. Again, the second way of making lists is just a little shortcut way. This is a list every bit the same as this is a list. One difference, though, is this list is not named. I mean, this list is called letters. This list, there's no name to it there, but it still works just the same way. I'm passing this list into this block, which I just wrote. So here it is again real quick. I'm going through the entire list and comparing the item at I to the next item. And if they are the same, hey, I found a repeat, I'm setting repeat to true. If this never happens, then repeats initially is false and it'll stay false. And that's what gets reported. So I hope this makes sense. All right, get to work.